the principles that are being used today, many of them still relate, because now the capacity is there.
And then you spent 13 years in public schools and another 23 years in higher education. And what was the biggest, because I know you participate in many activities, Ernie. You got lots of recognition, lots of honors, and lots of consulting requests. What was the best or one of the highlights during that period of your?
Yeah, absolutely the highlight was my appointment to the advisory committee to the Commission on Civil Rights in Washington in the Mexican-American study. If you Google it, you can still get, if you want to download the hard copies, it's still there. It was a breakthrough in Mexican-American education. In those times, of course, it was the southwestern states with some concentrations in Kansas, Chicago, and other places, but nothing like it is today, where the voting power is there now too. It dealt with the fiscal support for schools that had a predominant Mexican-American populations. The availability of counseling and how it was handled to help students who obviously could benefit from it. One of the biggest and best features of the whole study was one of verbal interaction analysis. It was a technique that came into really use, particularly in universities, teacher education in the 60s. And it was a system of codifying the verbal interaction in a classroom. And each one had a number. And each time that an interaction occurred between a teacher and a student, or students and students, and whatever, you coded a number every 3 seconds. Now, if you did that for over a period of 10 minutes, you begin to get a very, very good idea of how verbal interaction in a classroom occurred. Was the teacher using all of the time to talk at the students? How did the student and the teacher interact, and how did the teacher deal with a time-worn, ridiculous approach in teaching? Who can tell me? Who can tell me? Can you tell me about this? The teacher says, so you're sitting there and you don't have the slightest idea what to tell, because you don't know the tell. All right? The teacher would then say, well, either come with an interaction that says, you're not listening, and you'd better pay closer attention. Okay, right then and there it's a negative, and you would code that with the teacher reaction. Or the teacher might say, would you tell him? And it would be a student who was probably an Anglo student, or the champion of the class, to tell you, because after all, somebody's got to tell you. And that was sort of a put down. And the picture that came out in the schools that we particularly studied in Beeville, Texas, in El Paso, I don't remember all of them, but you can find them if you Google the study, gave a dismal picture, a real dismal picture of how teachers interacted with Latino kids. Arciniega from Bakersfield,
yes.
He was the dean of education at San Diego, and then he went president of Bakersfield. He and I were on we reported the findings throughout the Southwest in 1973. It was a 5-year study. So for me, it really made sense. In And the people in Beeville, the school people in Beeville had never seen a person with a name like Hernandez or Garcia or Gomez or Arciniega, other than their pickers or their field workers. And so when we got there, I was a good cop. I was assigned a good cop thing.
Oh, why were you a good cop?
Because, you see, the good cop, bad cop thing, and you heard of that concept, right? Somebody gives the bad news and gets at people, and then you become the ameliorator, and they begin to trust you more and more. And when we gave the study, the report on Beeville, and I had gone through the 3 schools there. The Mexican school was across the street from the non-Mexican school, and it was terrible condition. You know, the books and everything were terrible. And so when we made the report, and the interviews came out like this, well, they don't care much for education. The families don't care. They don't care. They don't support their kids. And then, blah, blah, blah. They're bilingual. So, and I said, well, isn't that an advantage? Well, no. And all these negative things. Test scores were like this. Here were the kids in the Mexican school, and here were the kids in the other school. First grade, or whenever they started, to 3rd grade, whatever. And it went like this, like this. In the meantime, these kids were dropping out all over the place. And it went like this. And even into high school, there was still this big division. And I wanted an explanation for it. And they gave me all these reasons why people don't care and so forth. So my analysis was, but have you ever stopped just for a minute to consider you might have lousy schools?
Oh, no.
What? Yeah, so that was a kind of interaction that we had with places. I was not the on-site researcher. I was on the advisory committee that oversaw the group. Recent death of Cecilia Arciniega from Stanford. She was one of the people in the group too.
And what year was this, Ernie?
68 to 73.
68, 73.
Uh-huh.
Ernie, you met Dorothy at Colton High School, your wife Dorothy, and you have how many children?
3 men.
And you've been married how many years?
It'll be this August, it'll be 62.
Congratulations.
Well, I don't know if it's congratulations or condolences, but
and 3 boys, and what are their names?
our eldest is Steve, Esteban, Steve.
And he works at the University of Redlands?
Yes, he's director of IT at
Uh-huh.
University of Redlands. Our middle son is Tim, and he is a general contractor. Our youngest son, Pat, is a dentist in Highland,
Uh-huh.
and he's a proud graduate of the UCLA Dental School.
Was he a graduate of Cal State also?
Interesting. He started his work, his schooling in La Sierra University, because he thought he might go to Loma Linda, so you get your BA from La Sierra, you know. Chances of getting into the dental school were pretty good. Well, he only spent 1 semester there because he complained. He said, all the girls disappear at 5 o'clock on Friday. And so he came here and was very successful. He majored in organic chemistry, did very well, finished at the end of his junior year here at Cal State. He was eligible to take the DAT, the dental, whatever it is, test. And he took it and he scored very, very high. So he did not have a senior year. And his, of course, his brothers and the other members of the family all gave him a hard time. You're a dentist and you didn't even have a BA? At one time, the dean here in natural sciences said, come on over and take a few of these things. We'd like to recognize you because you're a successful product of our school. Incidentally, one of the things that did happen here, he scored very, very high. I think was right along the top in all the things in the DAT. So he came over here to talk to some of his professors after he had been admitted to all of the dental schools in California and one in Colorado, except USC. Because I told him, if you apply at USC and you get admitted, you're on your own. I'm not going to pay for any Trojans. And so USC was scratched from the thing. He was admitted at Berkeley, which is in San Francisco, dental school, and also UCLA. But he came over to talk to his professors and to tell them that he'd been admitted to all the schools that he had applied to. And one of the professors said to him, well, I'll bet your name didn't hurt you much. So Pat reaches in his pocket and pulls out, neither did this. Straight top scores in the exam. He said, neither did this. But you see, that prejudice is still there. You were admitted because your name was Garcia.
Right. Now, Ernie, my last question. You're in the process of a project. You're writing a book. Can you tell us about your work in putting that book together?
It started, I hate to tell you when this started, but it was a long time ago. And again, procrastination. My manuscript, which was not all in the hard drive, burned in the 2003 fire.
Oh, okay.
Where my library was wiped out. Incidentally, at that time, I had the whole collection of the development of bilingual education. And not only that, but foreign language in the elementary school, which was FLES from 1958. I had everything boxed up and listed and to donate to the library. And of course, it all went up in flames. How did I get off on that? You asked me a question.
Your book.
Oh. I started writing it a long time ago. And what it was intended to be was just vignettes of life in South Colton, of all the things that happened there. For example, I'll just tell you about one of them because there are a lot of, 2-page things that happened. Maundy Thursday is the Holy Thursday before Good Friday. And of course, that's, in most Protestant churches, that was a time of, if there's a cross in the front of the chapel or whatever, it's draped in black and everything is somber. And, because here's this character, Judas, has just done a number. And I just was always so impressed with what happened at the Catholic Church across, just a block down the thing. Because Father Valencia would have that effigy of Judas hoisted up between the roof of the church and the building across the street. And then would have a band playing Tu ya no soplas con mujer. And the band is playing like crazy, and here's Judas up there, and they light the firecrackers and blow Judas to smithereens. And I said, man, that's what I like. What am I doing over here with this somber? So that was one of the stories in there. others had to do with the junk, and Raleigh Gomez and I going off to pick all kinds of things. Raleigh was closer to my age than
Ernie.
well, Ernie was
Tony.
that gay, Raleigh and
Tony. Gabby.
Tony was the oldest male, and then Gabby.
Gabby.
Yeah. Anyway, that was the last, right? Or you wanted?
Where are you in that book?
Oh, contacted the publishers this last month to see. I'm a novice at it. The last book that I co-authored was in 1970. Went out of print in 1970, and that was Mexican American heritage. That dealt just with that, la pizca, las minas, y el traque. It was used in mostly junior high schools in those days. So I hadn't, that was handled, the publisher just took all the manuscript and they produced the book. And I don't know how, I have a lot of pictures that are going to be in this book, some of them very old, some from 1914. Of course, the one from 1938 with Sonia Abril and I posing for a baseball picture that's in the book that says unpublished. So it's coming along. I would hope that it would be out by spring.
Okay, good.
And it covers just a lot of topics, but it's kind of funny.
Well, we need a copy of that for our South Colton collection here in this library. So.
Well, sure, that'll happen, I'm sure.
Yeah.
I had mentioned to you that the stresses and strains in the 30s in South Colton, because really the recency of the revolution and the people who came in the 20s and into the 30s, and the whole thing with Pancho Villa and his anger at the church and his prosecution of priests and all that, and there was a concomitant feeling of anybody who became a Protestant and the Catholic hierarchy. It was very, very strong. Now today, you look around and you have all these evangelical churches over here propping up here and here, and even the mainstream Methodist, Presbyterian, Congregational, Baptist, they're down in membership as opposed to offshoots of a lot of other things. So it's very different today. But in those days, just this humorous one. We've been to the movies, my buddies and I, Ray Gonzalez, Ray Carrion, myself, and a couple of other guys. We've been to the movies and we saw the Crusaders. Wow, really impressed. It was King Richard with a crown and a tunic, and the tunic was white with a big red cross, and wow, it was great. And they went off to this place called the Holy Land, where these guys with the crooked swords, who had a god named Allah, and we had ours named God, and all this stuff like this. So if you will ever notice when you go by the old Baptist church there in South Colton, it has a battlement